Today I'm going to be cracking out the paints for my junk journal, and I feel like I'm always on a bit of a quest to find a balance between the collage side of my junk journaling and also adding the paint, so that more mixed media, I suppose traditional art journal style, because I always find that I want to add paint, but then I feel like there's a limit between how much I add to it, and then I start to not like the pages. And having it complementing the collage, so you can see on some of my pages already, I do have some painted areas where I did some stenciling, and some of the areas I like more than others. So like this, I don't mind. I feel like this is a nice balance. Some of the pages at the start, I feel like there's a bit too much paint going on, so I'm a little bit nervous about adding paint to this next layer of this junk journal, but I'm trying to lean into some of the prompts, and I feel like, you know, this has reached one of the prompts where I'm a little bit nervous, I'm a little bit worried about what I'm potentially going to add to these journal pages, but at the end of the day, it's only paint and I can cover it up with whatever the next layer is if I decide that I don't like how it's looking. So I was thinking about what specific paint I wanted to add to these pages, and so I've pulled out a few different things. I've got some acrylic paints, I've got some paint markers, and then I've also got some watercolour paints as well, which I thought that, you know, maybe if I'm feeling that the acrylic paint is always a little bit overwhelming, because that's what I used for the stenciling, then maybe I should lean more into the watercolours and have something that is a little bit more subtle, I suppose. So that's why I've pulled out my watercolours here. So just in case you're curious, these are a mix of different paints in terms of brands. I think there's Daniel Smith's, there's Winsor & Newton, and then I think I've got some sort of handmade ones as well. So I've got lots of different colours. I've even got a second tin here of some more. These were, I think, also handmade. They might be Little Rainbow Moon, I think, and these are a little bit more sparkly, so I'm not quite sure about those, but I just pulled them out because there are a few Daniel Smith paints in here as well. So I thought, let's give myself the choice and the options. So yeah, I was thinking maybe watercolor, and then I was also thinking maybe, because I had some like tissue napkin paper, and I was wondering, like, could I paint onto this and then stick it in the journal, and maybe that would help to relieve the pressure, I suppose, of painting straight onto the journal. And I suppose it kind of meets the prompt painted pages pretty well for this journal page. I just got these out just to experiment with, so I figured we could have a try with these first. I'm just going to grab something to put underneath them. Okay, so I actually don't know how this is going to turn out, so I might do this and then you might not see it, or you might see it in a way that's like, look, this is what my first idea was and it was a total fail. But I got some smaller paintbrushes out just for this, because I figured I'm going to have some smaller detail areas as well. So I don't know how the watercolor is going to look on the tissue paper, because I'm guessing it's going to be quite brittle, and maybe it'll just like spread in a way that isn't what I think it's going to look like in my head, but let's give it a go. So I'm thinking maybe let's try some of the greens first, and I'm going to try and get like quite a bit of paint on my brush and not so much the water, to see if that makes a difference. And I think I'm just going to do some botanical, like, leaf sort of patterns with this. And I mean, these are a little bit bigger leaves than I was thinking, but there we go. And I'm hoping that this will just give like a nice soft effect that sort of blends into the page. And then also I don't need to worry too much about painting into the journal directly, because I can just, you know, have a go and then pick out the areas that I do want to add to the journal itself and collage them onto it. And I'm hoping, because it's a really thin like tissue napkin surface, that it will also blend into the surface. That was way too dark. Okay, this is why it's good to do it on a separate surface rather than straight into the journal, because that was not what I wanted. I mean, I do like that this is a little bit more loose in terms of the control that I have, if you can see there. Okay, so I'm definitely happier with my second attempt there versus I think this was a little bit too large, and I did a slightly different technique where I was just sort of pressing down with the brush itself rather than sort of tracing the shape of the leaves. So I'm gonna let that dry, and maybe I'll do another one whilst I'm waiting for that to dry. So let's try something else. Maybe we'll just do a bit of mark making perhaps. So I think this colour here is quinacridone gold, I want to say. You can tell I've definitely used it a lot. I think it must be because that was one of my favourite Daniel Smith colours back in the day. Okay, so I'm just going to sort of add them as little blobs almost, and just see how that looks. So I'm trying to get a balance between having not too much water that it goes everywhere, but also I still want that pooling effect that is going to shine through on tissue like this. So maybe I need a little bit more water, and this way I can just, you know, play around with the mark making, and I don't need to include every single piece of this within the journal. It might come in handy for, you know, something else even, and I can just use certain areas of this, but I really like the effect of the watercolor pooling there. Okay, so now that those are dry, I think I'm going to tear this piece up just so that I've got some different areas there to add to the journal pages, like so. And then I'm also going to carefully tear around this so I can add this to the page as well. And I'm really hoping that because it's this really thin napkin tissue paper that it actually blends in to the page itself. So let's find somewhere to add this to the journal. I mean, maybe it could go across here. That's an option. I think it's definitely going to work on, you know, a more plain collage background, like this even. I could add it to this and layer it over the text there. I think it might look nice there. Let's add it to that, because I can always do some more of these if I want to add them to different areas of the journal pages. Okay, I think that works quite well there. So let's see if adding some of this yellow won't be too much on some of these pages. I'm a little bit nervous, but let's have a go. I'm thinking maybe some really small areas of this could work, like here for example. Just like that, to add a little bit of colour to the pages. I'm definitely going to have to do something to this section because it's feeling very busy on these pages, and I don't know whether adding this is going to help or even make it a little bit worse. I'm going to be brave and try adding some paint just directly to the pages here. So I'm going to use this buff titanium, just acrylic paint this time, and I think this will be a nice contrast here that's sort of a little bit different to adding the white paint that I've done on the reverse and having that on the craft paper here. And I mean, maybe this is what I should have done on the other side actually, because now I'm adding this, I'm like, okay, that's added the paint effect that I want, but it's definitely more in keeping with the colour scheme, I think, especially with all the tea staining and things that we've got going on. So maybe I should cover up some of the areas that I don't like of the white paint and add some of this instead to it, because I think something like that looks a lot more subtle for sure. So in fact, I don't want any on. Maybe a little bit. So I don't want to completely cover everything, but I'll just add it in a few sections. So like for this section here, even though I've added it over the map, you can still see, I don't know if it's going to pick up on camera, but you can still see underneath, but it's just sort of subdued the colours. So we've made it more neutral, and I think that might be our issue on the reverse of this journal as well. See, and that's what's fun about doing this as a, like, you know, working on all of the pages, is that you can go back and forth. It's okay to change my mind and think, actually, no, I don't like that on the page, and work with different supplies and just see what they bring out of the different pages. So again, I'm not trying to like overwhelm what I've got going on here with this paint, but I'm just feeling like it's helping to bring things together a little bit. Even here, adding a subtle area there to blend in some of this grid paper that I've got. And something like this running throughout the entirety of the journal pages will, I think, help everything to look a lot more cohesive as well. So maybe I was being mean about acrylic paint, and it was actually the fact that I was using a stark white paint for the stenciling instead of using something like buff titanium. But I did really like the contrast, like the pop of the white paint against the craft paper, but I think this is still the same effect, but just like a bit more subtle. So I'm not adding too much paint, but I'm going to add some areas where I have just brushed it across the whole of the page, and then some areas where we've got the brush strokes showing through. I've gotten a little bit carried away here with after I've added my painted pieces, because this front section of the journal is really bothering me, and I'm trying to figure out how I can make it not bother me basically. I'm wondering whether I need to sort of push everything back, and I don't know, it's all just feeling a little bit too busy. I think it's the paint here that's bothering me, and I don't know how to get rid of that without covering up everything else. Okay, I've got rid of the map in the same way that I did on the reverse of this page, where you can still see it, but I've just subdued the colour slightly, and I think that that's helping a little bit with this. Obviously it still needs like imagery and things like that, but that is looking a little bit better, I think. Not great, but you know, still working on it as a background. This is where I am up to with my painted pages on my journal. So I've just added a little bit of this paint to different areas of these pages, and this is how it is looking. So I hope you enjoyed joining me for this journaling session, adding this paint to these pages, and I really love the way that it looks on here, especially with this watercolour element on the tissue paper. And this is the reverse of the journal as well. So definitely more of a subtle look in terms of the paint that I've added, but I think it just starts to bring things together a little bit throughout. So that is my painted pages, and I'll see you in the next one.